Personal task. The first thing we want to make sure is that the workplace that we're going to design for anyone who's using our personal tasks has to be optimized, has to be uh, easy to use. Okay, so as it says here, to optimize the productivity, whoever interacts with a personal task shouldn't be expected to do anything that could be performed automatically. And anything that has to be done manually should be quite simple, easy to understand, logical. And in order to do this, there's a lot of different features within the forms designer, within the forms creation, that are going to allow us to create very advanced forms. For example, we can input default data into the forms so that they already contain information that we know certain fields must contain in order for someone to perform their actions. We can input records with information, even external records. Okay, so we could connect external data to the activity. We can add instructions, we can add planifications, like time planifications. We could even set up alerts, alarms. So if someone is there, it's taking them a long time to perform their task, the system could send them a warning. Drag and drop options. Okay, so if we want to drag and drop, for example, a document into the form. Alerts, alarms, integrations, multimedia fields, external content, interaction rules, social collaboration, reports and statistics, conditional logic. So all of these features are included in the design and configuration of a personal task. And this is what's going to make it much easier for someone to be able to perform their tasks, their activities. Here we have an example of a sales process. So it says after the material request, the sales manager will have to revise the information, introduce the data in the ERP, and inform the sales director. Additionally, the sales manager is going to enter a short description of the sales targets and send all the information to the requester. So here we have a specific scenario. Okay, this is just an example. So someone tells us this is how my process should work. First, there's a material request. Afterwards, there's a sales manager who has to revise the information. Afterwards, data has to be introduced in an ERP and inform a sales director. Additionally, there's a sales manager who's going to enter a short description and so on. Okay, so here it's telling us basically the entire scenario. And this is the diagram. So here we have a start message event, and here we have several different objects. How do I know which one of these objects could be performed manually or require human intervention, and which ones could be done automatically? Well, here, for example, it says after the material request, so let's say the process starts with a request, the sales manager has to receive the information in order to revise it. Okay, so this obviously requires human intervention. So what would that be? It would be a personal task. And then it says that they have to introduce the data in the ERP and inform the sales director. Okay, so here the sales manager introduces the data in the ERP, and here automatically we're informing the sales director. Additionally, the sales manager is going to enter a short description. Okay, and afterwards they're going to they're going to send all the information to the requester here through a notification performed automatically. Now, how can this diagram be improved? Because we can say, yeah, it more or less follows the logic of this text, but we're going to see how it can be improved. First of all, when the performer isn't changing throughout a process, we're not supposed to create several tasks for the same performer. Okay, so here it says, after the material request, the sales manager will have to revise the information. Who's the sales manager? This guy here. Okay, he's going to revise the information. He's going to introduce the data in the ERP and inform the sales director. Okay, so here he's performing all those actions. We don't need two different tasks. Why would we want the sales manager to perform a task to resend himself another task? That wouldn't make sense. Okay, so if we see a scenario where one person has to perform several actions, we could use only one object. And this could be a bit confusing because here it says that we have to introduce the data in the ERP. This could be done automatically. Okay, so this could be maybe an action like automatically uploading data into another system. Obviously, we want this to be performed as soon as the sales manager has finished his task. So we could do it with a system task. And it doesn't really matter if it's before or after this other one. Why? Because these system tasks, it just takes milliseconds in order for them to be performed. So let's say the flow comes out of this object because the sales manager finished his task, and immediately, in less than a split second, the flow is already going to be down here. And all of these actions are going to be performed. Why? Because the system tasks are performed very, very quickly. We can hardly see the flow going from one object to another one. It's only the human tasks which stop the flow, and until a person hasn't finished all these activities, then the flow can continue. Okay, so as we can see here, we set up a personal task in order for the sales manager to be able to perform all of the actions he could perform. Okay, so as long as the performer doesn't change, only one task needs to be used. Not as in this initial example where we had different tasks for the same performer. And besides this, whatever could be done automatically, we just took it out of their task. Okay, so here we can see we have 3 different tasks for the sales manager, and here we only have 1. And all the things that could be performed automatically are done later on with these system tasks. So here, for example, we have a notifier system task where several users can be notified. In this example, the director and the requester, according to this text. And at the end, we're updating an external application. Okay, so the sales manager doesn't have to do this action. This is something that the system can perform. Now here we're going to see another example to better understand how these tasks work. We have a personal task, and we need it to be assigned to different performers in an intelligent way, depending on several factors that might be identified during the execution or even before the execution, in addition to having the mechanisms to solve any kind of scenario. So here we have a new suggestion that enters, maybe via our website. Someone inputs a suggestion, and it's going to be sent to a profile. It says each member of the profile receives a copy of the task. As many tasks will be created as members of the profile. So they all must agree to assign a coordinator for the suggestion, and that's going to be this next point in this process. Okay, so we're here in this activity, and maybe all of the people involved in this profile, they're going to vote for a coordinator. So when the process started, we actually didn't even know who the coordinator was going to be. Okay, so this information is input in a certain moment of the process. For example, when we started the process, we already knew who was going to be the profile, but we don't know who's going to be involved in the profile, because let's say the profile is every employee of the company that is older than 30 years old. Okay, well then when the flow reaches this moment, this task, it's going to know who has to be the performer of this task, because in that moment it's going to know in the system which employees are older or younger than 30 years. Okay, so it's going to evaluate that in that exact moment. And then when the flow goes out of this object to the coordinator's task, it's going to evaluate who's going to be the coordinator based on whatever decisions these affected members input into the system. Okay, so here the coordinator is assigned, he receives the task, but we also set it up just in case if he's absent, we want the system to detect the situation, and we want the task to be assigned to his superior. Okay, in this task, the action group is selected for the suggestion. So let's say the coordinator or whoever's performing this task instead of the coordinator because he was absent is going to indicate who's going to be the action group. And the action group is going to be assigned here in another task. Okay, so each member of the action group receives the same task, and the first one to reclaim it becomes a performer. So when we're diagramming, what we want to see in this example is that we don't need to create one task per each performer, okay? Because we can also send tasks to lots of members, to groups of employees, or to profiles, or to certain roles of the company. So it doesn't actually have to be a person all the time. So in this example, well, we're not seeing how it's configured because this is something we'll see later. But in this example, we have a diagram with 4 objects. Regardless if maybe there was 3 employees here and 3 here, we don't have to diagram 3 different tasks for each one of these performers. So here we have another example that highlights this situation. Let's say the scenario says a personal task can be assigned to different performers depending on several factors, as we just mentioned earlier in the previous scenario. We would have this diagram that's been designed incorrectly, and this one that has been designed correctly. For example, we have a new suggestion, and the suggestion is going to be dynamically assigned to a profile, instead of creating one task for each one of the members that could be involved in that profile. Besides, this would be impossible because we never know how many people is going to fit into the conditions of the profile. Okay, if we said that the profile is people who are older than 30 years old, when I configure this process, I don't know if more or less people in the company are going to be over 30. Okay, so this is something we cannot define like this. We don't define this in the diagram. We define it later on in the configurations and the settings of each object. And then here it says that the coordinator receives a task, and if he's absent, there's someone that the task is delegated to. Okay, and we're not going to diagram this like that. In this scenario, it shows, is a coordinator available? Yes. Well, then it goes here. He's not available? No. Then it goes to this other coordinator. Okay, we're not going to have to define all of this. This is something that can already be automatically performed in the settings of this task. And then here there's an action group, and we said that the action group could delegate. Okay, so let's say it reaches the first member of the action group. If they decide to delegate, it's going to go to the next one. If they decide to delegate, it's going to go to the next one. Or if they don't decide to delegate, then it's just going to finish the process. Okay, so this would also be incorrect if we say, look, it's going to go to an action group and they can delegate it within anyone inside of their action group. Well, this is something that's going to be set up later in the parameters of this task. It's not as if we're supposed to diagram this and use dozens of objects in order to cover this scenario. Okay, so the scenario we just saw could be easily covered with these 4 objects. We don't need, I don't know, 10 or 15 or 30 different objects to cover this simple scenario.